Hey everyone! There's this idea that's captivated us for centuries. The idea of a truly lawless land. A place with no rules, no government, where you can just be free. It's the stuff of adventure novels and blockbuster movies. But today, we're going to ask a simple question. Does a place like that actually exist anywhere on Earth?
So let's just put it out there. Can you really find a spot on the map, plant a flag, and say, no laws apply here? A place where you're not just off the grid, but off the legal grid entirely. It's a really cool thought, right?
I mean, the fantasy of some forgotten frontier or modern-day pirate cove or anything goes. That's exciting. But as we're about to find out, the way our world is actually stitched together is honestly way more fascinating than the fiction. So let's jump in and start peeling back the layers.
Okay, first up, we're going to take a look at some places that have this reputation for being lawless. The spots you hear about, the ones that seem to be dangling right on the edge of society. But are they really what they seem? Let's start with a famous one, Slab City, California. It's got this killer nickname, the last free place in America. The myth is that it's a complete free-for-all, no rules whatsoever. But the reality? Well, it's a bit less wild. Sure, there's no mayor, no city taxes, but all federal, state, and county laws still apply. The local sheriff's department definitely patrols.
So the verdict on Slab City is that its reputation is pretty misleading. It's not lawless, it's just lightly governed. And this is a really important distinction we're going to see again and again. Having no local government is not the same thing as having no laws at all.
Okay, now let's go from a desert squatter camp to literally the middle of the ocean. Tristan da Cunha. This is one of the most remote inhabited islands on the entire planet. The thinking goes, how could a tiny community of 250 people this far from everything have any real laws? Well, turns out it's a British overseas territory with its own police force and its own formal court system.
The takeaway here is that being a remote doesn't create a legal vacuum. Just because a place is incredibly hard to get to doesn't mean it's not plugged into a larger legal framework. Tristan da Cunha is proof that law and order can exist anywhere, no matter how isolated.
All right, so let's take this idea a step further. We're now going to look at places where the whole concept of national law gets a little fuzzy. Places governed by unique agreements that go beyond any single country's borders.
But before we can talk about our next location, you have to understand this one key thing, the Antarctic Treaty. Now, this isn't a law from any one country. It's a huge international agreement, basically a set of ground rules that dozens of nations have agreed to follow to keep the continent peaceful and dedicated to science.
And Antarctica is the perfect example of this in action. The myth is that since no country owns it, it's a lawless wasteland. But the reality is that the entire continent is governed by that treaty. So while there's no one king of Antarctica, if you're there, you're still bound by a complex set of rules and, often, the laws of your own home country.
So, our verdict? Antarctica is absolutely not lawless, it's just governed differently. It shows us that law can be a cooperative international effort. It's not a legal void, it's actually one of the greatest examples of global cooperation we have.
Now, let's talk about one of the most incredible places on Earth, North Sentinel Island. The popular image is of this totally wild, ungoverned island where the local tribe lives completely outside of any rules. But the truth is way more interesting. The island is officially part of India, and the most important Indian law related to this island is the one that says it is illegal for us to go there.
Think about that for a second. The law isn't there to control the Sentinelese people, it's there to protect them from us. It's a law of enforced isolation. So you have two legal systems operating at once, the tribe's own ancient customs and an external law that acts like a shield around them. It's fascinating. So, if even the most isolated places on Earth are covered by some kind of law, where does that leave us? Well, now we're going to venture into the true gray zones of the world, the spots that get us as close as we possibly can to being legal ghosts. When we think about uncontacted tribes deep in the rainforests, it's tempting to think they're living completely without rules. But that's a huge misunderstanding. Just because they don't have written legal codes and courtrooms doesn't mean they don't have governance. These societies are held together by incredibly complex systems of customs, traditions, and social norms that have worked for generations. And this really forces us to expand our definition of what law even is. It's not just something a government writes down. There's also customary law, the unwritten rules that a community lives by. And that is one of the oldest and most fundamental forms of law on the planet.
And that finally brings us to Bir Tawil. It's a patch of desert wedged between Egypt and Sudan. And because of a weird quirk from old colonial maps, neither country actually claims it. This is the closest we get.
On the ground, there's no government, no police, nobody enforcing any set of laws.
So the verdict here is functionally lawless. This is the key difference between law on the books and law in practice. While some country could theoretically claim it and enforce laws, in reality nobody does. It exists in this strange legal limbo, a true ghost on the world's legal map.
Wow. Okay, we have been from the California desert to Antarctica to a tiny patch of unclaimed sand in Africa. After all that searching, what's the final call on the myth of the lawless land?
This chart really pulls it all together. Just look down the list. From national laws in Slab City to British law on Tristan da Cunha to international treaties in Antarctica to the customary laws of uncontacted tribes, every single place is governed by some kind of system. The only one that comes close to being an exception is beer to wheel, and even that's more of a weird technicality than a true law-free zone.
So here it is, the big takeaway from our whole journey. True, absolute lawlessness, it's a myth. It just doesn't exist on planet Earth. What we have instead is this incredible spectrum of governance. Rules, in one form or another, are a basic, fundamental part of every human society everywhere.
And that leaves us with a much bigger, more profound question to think about. If you can't actually escape rules, then maybe that romantic idea of freedom we started with, the freedom from rules, is all wrong. Maybe real freedom isn't the absence of rules, but the power to have a say in creating the rules we all live by. Something to chew on. Thanks for joining me on this one.